Well, the breaking news continues, this time back in Washington, where we are less than 35 hours away from a government shutdown. So far, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have failed to come to an agreement on legislation which would keep our federal government running. So a shutdown would stop paychecks for 2 million active duty service members, and millions of federal workers could be furloughed or asked to work without pay. But some major services for citizens would continue. We're talking Social Security payments, Medicare and Medicaid payments to healthcare providers, as well as disability payments to our veterans. Let's bring in NewsNation's Joe Khalil live for us from the Capitol there. So, Joe, talk about how a shutdown would impact Americans.
Yeah, so Nichole, let's put the politics of this aside here for a second. What we have to remember is that the more painful this is, it's going to depend on how long it lasts. So if there is a shutdown that lasts a couple of days, it may not have that much of an impact on regular folks, on Americans, and on the economy. But if we're talking about a potential shutdown that goes for days, if not weeks even, that could cause some serious damage to our economy and really hurt workers, mostly lower income people. All of that, by the way, is in the hands of Congress, which I'm sure is not reassuring to anybody right now who's watching this. So we start with people who are more on the low income side of things. If you're somebody who is on food stamps or gets that assistance, or children who get that assistance, those payments would actually stop. That is something that is very concerning. You talk about military members. They would no longer be paid so long as the shutdown continues. In fact, one member of Congress, Jake Auchincloss, we heard from, who's a veteran himself and one of the top Democrats on the Financial Services Committee, says today about a third of active duty military and their families have $2,000 or less in savings to fall back on. That is scary if we've got an extended shutdown where they're not being paid. Seniors, one of our more vulnerable communities, they could feel some pain. You mentioned that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security payments would still go out, but the federal workers that administer those programs, many of them would be furloughed. So if people have complications, they need to contact help for those services, that might be impacted, and that could be really scary. We heard Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg talk about his industry as well. People who are air traffic controllers in training, who are now working, by the way, would be furloughed. And so that could certainly cause more delays in traffic. And then we're talking about federal workers, anyone who gets a paycheck from the government, many of those people here in Washington, but you've got them all around the country. Even people like federal border agents, for example, they would have to continue working. TSA agents would have to continue working, and they would not be getting paid for their work. Now, earlier this morning, Speaker Kevin McCarthy addressed some of these issues. The political back and forth of this is not necessarily Democrat on Republican. A lot of these complications are Republican versus Republican in the House. And ultimately, Speaker McCarthy is going to be responsible for that. So he took questions about the impacts of a shutdown, got a little tense at times. Here's what he told reporters.
The number one thing I want here is for government not to shut down. I do not want our military not to be paid, our border agents not to be paid.
So how we sit now is the House is currently debating a temporary bill they call it a CR, a resolution that would fund the government for 30 days. It would avoid a shutdown, and it would avoid all the pain that we just talked about for regular Americans. There's a House version of that bill that just some Republicans support. Many Republicans don't, and Democrats don't support it. There's a Senate version as well, a temporary budget funding bill. But right now, neither side is reconciling those two together. That is where the disconnect lies, Nichole, and that's what we're keeping our eyes on as Americans all across the country brace for what could be some painful cuts.
Oh, yeah. I think a lot of Americans are frustrated by this. All right, Joe Khalil live in the Capitol. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.